mix them up. Most of the time, oxygen is always green, and most of the time, acetylene is always red. As you can see, this tank is not red, it's black. Okay, but oxygen will always be green, acetylene will always be red, so you don't mess those up. Okay. If you take a look at the tank, at the hoses and the regulators, you can see green and you can see red. Okay, so that way you do not put these in the wrong area. Okay, and if you do put them in the wrong area, there'll be some issues. Okay, so we want to make sure that you understand oxygen is green, acetylene is red. Okay. What we're going to do is we've got to understand a couple of things about oxygen. Is that right now you're breathing air, and that's oxygen, correct? You're breathing about 20% oxygen. Right now you're breathing about 20% oxygen. The rest of it is different kinds of gases, that nitrogen, but right now you're breathing 20% oxygen. In this tank is 100% oxygen. Okay? If I open up this gauge, 100% oxygen will come out. Okay? Actually, I think it's 99.5 or something like that. It might be mixed with a couple other small little gases, but this is all 100% oxygen. Acetylene is a different monster. Acetylene, when we open this tank up, it's a gas. But inside the tank, there's a mixture of a couple different things, okay? And if you want to watch a video on acetylene, which I have, it'll give you how acetylene is set up. A couple of things about oxygen. I can take this oxygen tank and lay it down and operate it, okay? I cannot do that with acetylene. It has to be setting up this way. It cannot be laid down and operated, okay? Because of the mixture inside, okay? Because of the components inside, it cannot be laid down and operated. So it has to be standing up at all times, okay? So there's a couple of things about these oxygen and acetylene, okay? A couple of things that we want to talk about before we begin is safety. Safety is huge. Safety goggles, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. We're going to talk about gloves, and we're going to talk about your outfit, what you're wearing. Must have boots. Must have boots, okay? No exception. You drop a piece of slag on your foot, it's going to burn right through that tennis shoe, and it'll definitely burn you. So we got to have boots. I have a couple different pairs of work gloves here. We have actually welding gloves here, which are in the back room if you don't have a pair of work gloves. And we just have a regular pair of work gloves here also, so which you can use either one of them. The metal will get it's sharp, number one, and it will get very hot. So we want to make sure that you have your work gloves when you're using this. We talked about safety glasses. These are your safety goggles that you're going to be using with this. Now, I know none of you have these, but I have dozens of pair in the back. Okay? What you're going to do is you're going to grab a pair, you're going to clean it, you're going to use it, and when you're done, you're going to clean it and then put it back. Okay? Couple of things about these shaded safety glasses. Okay? They are shaded to different shades. So if I put this one on, I can kind of not see anything. If I put this one on, I can see you a little bit. So the shading on them is different. Recommended shading for this, for oxygen setting is number 5 tint to number 9 tint. I'm going to leave these down here so you can take a look at these later, and you're going to notice there's a big difference. One of these is 5, and one of these is 9. Every one of you are going to be different. Some of you might want a darker tint. Some of you might want a lighter tint. We cannot operate the oxygen acetylene without these safety goggles on, okay? Because that flame is too bright, okay? And we don't want you burning your eyeballs, okay? So you must wear these safety goggles. These are dirty right now, but they will need to be cleaned. Also, we have some of these arms. If you're wearing short sleeves, you can put these on. Now, I don't have a pair for everybody, and during the coronavirus, I'm not going to share these with you, but if you'd like to get a pair, you can. They're just armbands that you put up if you're welding, so you don't get any splatter on your arm, okay? So if you'd like to get a pair of these on your own, you're more than welcome. Same things with gloves. I have gloves in the back. I recommend you get your own because of the coronavirus, okay? I don't want you sharing if we don't have to, okay? All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you, let me take a look at my notes here. Gloves, face shield, leather boots. Okay, there we go. tank. They call this a tank or a cylinder. Either one of those. You can use a tank or cylinder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to hook this up. Okay, this one here, as you can see, is completely apart. This one here is completely together. And we're going to use both of these. We have a cutting torch here. On this side, we have a cutting torch. And on this side over here, we have this is called a brazing torch. Okay, so we have a lot of different ones. Okay, these tips are interchangeable. And we're not going to talk about the tips today. I just want to get you set up on showing you how to set this machine up. All right, so first thing you want to do is when you're setting this up is, before I do that, oxygen and grease or oil are not friends. Oxygen and grease, oil are not friends. You can clearly see that this glove over here, I don't know what's on it. I don't know if it could be anything. I do not want to take this and rub it over here because oxygen and grease will have something called spontaneous combustion. Does anybody know what that is, spontaneous combustion? Well, that's going to be a question for you, so you'll have to find out. Spontaneous combustion just happens, it just happens. You don't need a spark, you don't need a flame, you don't need anything, okay? Grease and oxygen will start a fire. It will start a fire. So you want to make sure that this stays clean. We don't want to get anything on it, okay? Same thing with the acetylene over here.
You want to talk about transporting this?
Yeah, Mr. Martino brought up a great point about transporting these. We don't have any of these set up in our lab, except for on the carts. And as you notice, they're on the carts, they're chained in. They're chained in. Now, if we had some extra ones sitting around in our shop, they would have to be chained to the wall, chained to the fence. They cannot stand alone, okay? Because if they fall, bad things will happen. Bad things will happen, okay? So, but we don't store any here. We keep them stored down in the welding lab, okay? We keep them stored down there, and they have them chained to the walls and fences down there. But if you notice that these ones here are chained up also. These are chained up also. They have to be chained up. Okay, at all times. If we send you down to the welding lab, here's one of our carts. Notice it has a chain on it. You take the empty down, it must be chained. You get the new one, you have to have it chained and brought up, okay? Make sure anytime you move one of these tanks or unchain this chain, this cap has to be on it. So if I want to take this and move it right now, my first thing I would do is put the cap on, tighten it down, unchain it, and away we go, okay? It has to be on a chain at all times. The only time it shouldn't be is when you're transporting it over to here, and the cap should be on a few minutes. Yeah. Also, another safety concern you might want to see is that each one of our tanks, each one of our carts has a fire extinguisher posted right next to it, okay? Each one of these has a fire extinguisher. I'm going to show you the proper way to use a fire extinguisher so that you know, but it's here on all of our oxygen acetylene tanks, okay? So we don't have them set up on the MIG welders because that's a completely different tool, but they are set up over here on the oxygen acetylene, okay? All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to hook this baby up. But before I hook it up, in these regulators, there's not a big area to go through here, okay? Not a big area to go through here, and its hole here is actually pretty small. So if I have any contaminants in here, they're going to blow into my regulator, and my regulator won't work right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stand away from the tank, and I'm just going to crank this open just a hair. Now I know there's no contaminants in here. Okay, so now I can begin setting that up, and I'm going to do the same thing with the acetylene. I'm going to crank this open just a little. Make sure there's no dirt in there. So we've done that, okay? Now if you were down here right now, you'd be able to smell this. Anybody know what the smell that's coming out of here? What does acetylene smell like? Anybody know? Actually, acetylene does not have a smell. They add a smell to this so you know that it's being discharged. This is called Teflon tape. I've watched videos over the past couple of days. And some people use Teflon tape and some people did not use Teflon tape. I guess it's maybe a preference thing. Me personally, I was taught to use Teflon tape from my father, and so that way I'm going to show you how to use Teflon tape. Does anybody not know what Teflon tape is? Anybody know what it is? Teflon tape, yeah? Teflon tape is just a very thin tape. It doesn't have a sticky side or anything. But what we're going to do is we're going to wrap a little bit of this Teflon tape around this fitting over here. And what it does is it helps prevent leaks. So I'm going to wrap this around just like 1 or 2 times. There's 1, and there's 2. I don't need any more. And then I'm going to take it off. It helps, this Teflon tape helps prevent leaks. So let me wrap it around this acetylene over here. So we're going to take this and we're going to wrap it around the acetylene also, so it's done. Like I said, the videos that I had watched, some people had put the Teflon tape on, and some people had not put the Teflon tape on. So I'm going to guess it's a preference thing. So I'm going to just make sure that this is pushed down and out of the way, so we get a clean setting over there. Now before I put this on, I want to make sure that I inspect my hose. I want to make sure that this hose is in good working order, because what happens is over time these hoses dry rot. They become dry rotted, okay? And they start to get cracks in them. And this one here looks pretty good. So I'm going to install this. This onto the tank, okay? I'm going to take it over here and I'm just going to get it started. Just going to get it started over here. Thank you. And I'm going to do the same thing with the acetylene. So I'm going to break it over here. Now notice, green. Green is oxygen. Red is acetylene. Let me inspect the hose, and away we go. The hose looks like it's in pretty good shape. So now we're going to set the acetylene up. Okay? I'm going to set this up. I'm just going to tighten it by hand right now. There we go. There we go. Now before I begin to tighten this, I want to make sure that these tanks are facing me, so I can turn, do my work, and look over and make sure that the gauge is set properly. I do not want this gauge facing down this way. It does me no good. I can't see what the gauge is reading. So this regulator, this is called a regulator here, okay? We have 2 regulators. I want to make sure that they're upward, okay, before I snug them down. So both of them are facing upward. It doesn't matter. If I wanted this one to face this way, it's perfectly fine. That way I can look down and see it, or if you want to face it this way, that's perfectly fine also. However you want to set it up. But you must be able to read these gauges. You must be able to read the gauges in order to see what's going on. So I like exactly where they're set. I'm going to come in here with the proper wrench. One thing that you do not want to do, you do not want to grab channel locks on here. You do not want to grab vice grips on here. You don't want to put anything on this brass fitting unless it's the exact size wrench. In the back of these carts, we have wrenches also, which they're not here. But I never use those anyway. I go grab the wrench that I need. And this just happens to be 1 1/8 inches. So I'm going to take this on here. I'm going to give it a little snug and tighten it down a little bit. And make sure it's nice and snug. Go. That's nice and snug, and let's do the same with this one here. But once again, do not use vice grips. There's the wrench for it also if you'd like to use that. Personally, this is the one that I use. No vice grips, no channel locks, only the right size wrench over here, because this brass it's soft. So if you use those tools, you'll damage these fittings, okay? You'll damage these fittings. You can also use one of these adjustable wrenches, okay, if you choose. This will work also, so you can adjust it to the right size, okay? So those are a couple tools you can use, and those are the only tools that you can use for this. What we're going to do is we're going to turn these on, and we're going to check for leaks, okay? I want to make sure that these are not leaking anywhere. So what I'm going to do is, with the oxygen tank, I'm going to open this valve slowly. I do not know how much pressure is in here. They go up to 2,500 PSI. Does anybody know what PSI stands for? Per square inch. 2,500 pounds per square inch. That's quite a bit. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to do it slowly. There you go, nice and slow. Now, once I get it opened, I'm ready to go. So now this tank here, right now has about 500 PSI in it. Okay, so I open that up. Now, when you open up this oxygen tank, you must open the valve 100% of the way. You must open this tank up 100% of the way. That way, inside here, there's a seating in here. If you don't open it up all the way, you won't get the proper amount of air coming out. So this has to be opened all the way. Now I'm going to open up the acetylene, okay? And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to open it slowly. Once I got it open, now it's open. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to only open up the acetylene to a maximum of 1/2 turn. 1/2 turn. So right now I'm sitting here, a maximum of 1/2 turn. Okay? Why would I open this one up all the way and only open up this 1/4 to 1/2 turn? Any clues? Well, the answer is that oxygen doesn't burn. Oxygen adds heat to the flame. Acetylene is what gets our fire going. So if something happens, if we get some backfire into here, I can come over here and quickly turn that off. I won't sit here like this and turn this thing so many times to try to shut it off. So the reason we only open this 1/4 of the way is for safety reasons, okay? So we can shut it off quickly if necessary, okay? So once again, I'm gonna crack it open, and then I'm gonna give it 1/4 to 1/2 turn max. Acetylene, okay? Acetylene only opens up 1/2 turn maximum, okay? And now we're set and ready to go, okay? I have to check my fittings to make sure that they are set up properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to take a look at this, and I'm going to just grab some soapy water, which I happen to have right here. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to spray some water on here, some soapy water. I'm going to open up my green line, my acetylene, I might get my gas, oxygen, okay? I can hear it coming out. And I'm gonna put some in here. Nothing. I have no bubbles, which is a good thing. So now I'm gonna shut off the oxygen and I'm gonna add the acetylene. Set this up. All right, so I can hear my acetylene coming out. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna spray some water in here, some soapy water. I'm gonna check for bubbles, and there are no bubbles. So now I'm gonna shut this off, okay? Awesome. Okay, I'm just draining the tank right now. Let me open this up. I'm gonna show you how to do this in a second. All right, I released all the air pressure from all the air pressure is released. Okay. All right, so I checked for leakage where I put it on. Now, if you take these hoses off here and you take the hose off here, of course you'll have to check for leakage. And if you take the hoses off here and reseat them, you'll have to check for leakage. Now, we haven't taken these off. We're not going to, but if you do take these off, they have to be checked with soapy water. Okay? One other thing about these lines, if you take a look at the oxygen line, you probably can't see it from there. If you take a look at the oxygen line, it looks smooth. But if you take a look at the acetylene line, it's got a little tiny groove in here. Right on the line, it's got a little groove here, and it's got a little groove in here. When you come down here, I will show you those grooves, and we're going to talk about that and what that means. If you do change this piece on here, the one with the line is a reverse thread, meaning it gets threaded on the opposite way. It's not threaded on normally. It's a reverse thread. So when you come down and you start turning it on, you start twisting it in like it's going to go on, it will never go on. You have to do it the opposite way. It's a reverse thread. So righty-tighty, lefty-loosey will not work here, okay? So you have to make sure you understand that. When you come down here, I'll show you that little piece, okay? I'll show you that little piece. All right, we got everything set up over here. Now I'm going to show you how to set the gauges. Once again, I watched a lot of videos over the past couple of days about oxygen acetylene. Now you would think, well, I've been doing this for 50 years. You should automatically know what the settings are, right? Well, that's not the way things work, okay? If you want to be up to date, you need to watch and pay attention and read what's going on, okay? Now, back in the day when I was taught to operate these, my father taught me completely wrong. He taught me completely wrong. My dad was big into CB radios, and he said, okay, well, the setting should be 10-4. Like when you did CB talk, you'd say 10-4. That means yes. So he taught me to put this at 10, and he taught me to put this at 40. 10 pounds and 40 pounds. That's not correct, okay? And I didn't know that until years later. So the correct setting, according to online, was 5 and 7. Was 5 pounds and 7 pounds. Well, I came out here on Friday and I started running with 5 and 7 pounds, and it just wasn't working for me. But I kept the acetylene at 5, and I moved the oxygen up a little bit. I turned it up to 10. So I started running at 10 psi. And I thought to myself, well, that's still not working the way I want it. So I turned it up to about 15, and it was working the way I like it to work. So what I got from all of the settings and reading and doing everything, everybody has it set up a little bit differently. But I can tell you one thing about the acetylene. It will not change. 5 psi, always. Never any more, never any less. We can adjust the oxygen to get more flame or a hotter flame, but we should never set the acetylene above 5 psi. If you take a look at this gauge over here on the acetylene, it redlines at 15 psi. If you set this up to 15 psi and you go to start this, the top of this thing can very easily blow off. Now you're thinking, how is that going to? Well, this is a ticking time bomb if you do not set it up properly. So one of the points that I'm going to make to you is, you should never set the acetylene above 5 psi. Never, ever set it above 5 psi, okay? When you come down here, once I'm done, I'm going to have you come down and we're going to take a look at these gauges together, okay? All right, so let's do, first of all, set this gauge up over here, okay? This is your regulator. Right now, I have 500 psi coming over here to this regulator. And inside this regulator is something called a diaphragm. And I can adjust how much I want coming into this hose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this in, and I'm going to set it up to around 15 psi, because that's where I felt comfortable the other day when I was doing this. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to set this regulator up to 5 psi, okay? Actually, this gauge might be a little off. So we're going to set it up a little bit higher, okay? And then we're going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to turn these on slowly. Okay, that's good. And I'm going to turn this up. And I'm going to open a half a turn. Okay, there we go. I'm going to open these tanks up here. I'm going to open these up so I can get an accurate reading. Okay, I'm going to open this up. Oh. Let me redo that. I'm going to shut these gauges all off. I'm going to drain these tanks. There we go. It wasn't closed properly. So I'm going to set that up, and then I'm going to open it all the way. I'm going to open up my acetylene, and I'm going to turn it a half a turn. There we go, and we're set. Okay, so now this tank is ready to go. Both tanks are set up and ready to go. Now this one here, Mr. Martino, could you grab me, oh wait, maybe I can tighten it up. There we go, I think that's tight enough. First we're going to start with the brazing torch. Because it's a little bit easier to operate. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to get myself set up over here. Get myself set up. 10 psi. That's pretty close. It doesn't show me 10, but we're going to go there. And then we're going to go to 5 psi. Notice I opened it up to make sure I get a good reading here. Once I get a reading, I'm going to go from there. I'll set the other one. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to fire this torch up, okay? I'm going to show you how to fire the torch up. We have these strikers over here. We have multiple strikers behind here. Working all right. There we go. Okay. Now we have everything set up over here. We got the tank set up. And like I says, we're going to go over this together. I'm going to go over each one of these together with each one of you individually to make sure you do this properly, okay? So I'm just showing you right now how we're going to do it. So in order to fire up this torch, does oxygen burn? Oxygen does not burn. Oxygen will make a fire hotter. Okay, have you ever sat over a campfire and start blowing into it? It starts to get hotter and hotter. So the one that we need to ignite is the red hose, which is the acetylene. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crack this open just a hair, and then I'm going to fire it up. And then away we go. So we got it fired up. If you take a look, this black stuff coming off of here is soot. That's not a good thing. So what I want to do is, now I'm going to show you a couple different settings. You can see there's very low. You can see the soot really coming off of there. You can really see that soot coming off of that side.
That stuff will settle all over things.
It'll go all over the shop. Your desk, if I keep going this, your desk is going to be filled with it later. So now what I want to do is I want to turn my acetylene up. And my father told me to set the acetylene up so there's just a little bit of soot coming off of there. Okay, you can go a little bit more if you choose. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to slowly open up the oxygen. So I'm going to slowly open up the oxygen and I'm going to bring that flame in. And that's what I just did right there. How many of you can hear that? Okay, well this is a pretty hot flame. It's a pretty hot flame. You can take a look at the cone. The cone, the deep blue part of this flame is the hot part of the flame. That's where we get all of our heat. Now, you can hear this pretty well. In the welding that we're going to do is braze welding. We don't need that much heat. So once I get it set up to this point, I need to get rid of some of the heat. Okay? I need to get rid of it. It's just too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower my acetylene a little bit. A little bit. That's all I did was lower my acetylene. I didn't use... Now, can you hear the flame? Barely. Barely. You can barely hear the flame from here. So when you go to start to weld something together, you're going to need to adjust this. Do I need a lot of heat? Do I need a little bit of heat? Okay, so it's going to, every project that you do might be different. I can't say, well, this is the exact setting that it must be. That's not the way this works. The exact setting will be the setting that you need. Okay, so if you're cutting a thicker piece of metal, welding a thicker piece of metal, you're going to need more heat. If you're using a thin piece of sheet metal, you're going to need less heat. Okay, so if let's say I want less heat than this, I'm going to take the acetylene, lower it down, adjust the oxygen a little bit. Now I hear nothing. Now this is a very soft flame. So what we're going to do is each one of you are going to light this up. You're going to get a hot flame, and then you're going to get a light flame, just like this, okay? So those are the things that we need to do and show you about your oxygen and acetylene and how to set these up to get the right temperature you need. We're going to get up, we're going to have two different kinds of metal here for you to just heat up. We're just going to heat those two metals up using a different kind of flame. Once we heat those metals up, then we're going to get a thin piece of sheet metal, and we're going to weld to it, and then we're going to get thicker and thicker and thicker, and then you're going to need to be able to adjust this flame accordingly to what you're welding to. Okay? Very simple. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut everything down. Okay? So the first thing I do is I shut the acetylene off. Okay? Then I shut the oxygen off. You turn the acetylene on first, and then the oxygen. You turn the acetylene off, and then the oxygen, okay? All right, so now what I want to do is I'm done with my tanks. Do not leave your tank just like this. You're done with it, you're going to walk away. You're going to lunch. You're going to lunch. And you know when you come back, you're going to get back onto your welding, okay? Before you leave this piece of equipment, you must shut it down properly. You must shut it down properly, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the proper way to shut it down. Ring, ring, bell rings for lunch. We got to go to lunch. I need to drain these lines. I cannot leave it here. I cannot leave these settings the way they are, because if Mr. Martino comes in and decides to do some welding, and he just opens it up, he doesn't know where the setting is or anything. So it needs to be drained after every use, and it needs to be set up properly before every use, okay? So we're gonna drain the tanks, and it's as simple as this, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm just gonna shut everything off here. I'm gonna shut the tanks down. Shut both tanks. Shut both tanks. Now that was only a half a turn. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to open up the acetylene, and I'm going to open up the oxygen. Now what I've done is I drained all of the tanks. There's no gas in there. I'm going to just close these lightly. Close these lightly. And then I'm going to come over and I'm going to open these check valves. Or this isn't a check valve. This is a seating valve. They call this a seating valve. It pushes in. So now it's open, and now I'm done. Now I can go to lunch, and when I come back from lunch, I can reset up my tank. Simple, okay? Now you know everything there is to know about oxygen acetylene. Safety, make sure you wear your goggles, work boots, gloves. What I'd like to do is turn this on, keep my hand pointed away, and fire that up. Notice where my hand is at. It's not this way. It's not pointing towards my hand. It's pointing away from me, okay? It's pointing away from me. So make sure that you understand that. Take it and point it away. Take it and point it away. These strikers, there's a little flint inside of here. There's a little flint, and I have some brand new ones. So if these start to go bad, where you're striking it and you're not getting a spark, we will put a new flint in there. So you want to strike this and make sure you're getting a spark, okay?
They're a little tricky to figure out at first.
Yeah, you'll get there. They're not hard. What you want to do is you want to push down on it and in. Down and in. So that's the way you want to do that. All of you will get an opportunity to do that. All right, well, I'm going back to where I was before. Get rid of that soot. Then I'm going to turn in my oxygen until I can bring that cone in. Look how big that cone is, all the way out to here now. So I'm going to slowly bring this oxygen in and bring that cone inward. And there it is. It won't move anymore. There we go. So I got it set up. Once again, do I need a hot flame or a cold flame? So we're going to back this away a little. I can get myself a nice cold flame, okay? When I say cold flame, there's no such thing as a cold flame, but I should say less aggressive flame. How's that? Okay?